Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Dr. Emma Jones. Hey, Dr. Jones.
Hi, Kimberly. It's nice to be here with you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, nice to have you. And I'm really excited about what we're going to talk about. So let me read your short bio. So, Dr. Emma Jones is a hospice and palliative care physician with over a decade of experience. She has also worked as a pediatric oncologist and general pediatrician. Her journey has taken her through some of the most intense parts of medicine, where she has witnessed both the fragility and strength of human life. Throughout her career, she has mentored countless healthcare professionals. She's authored a book, The Phoenix Blueprint, Emerging Stronger from the Blaze of Healthcare. Well, Emma, I would love to hear your story. We were talking a little bit before we came on here about just the medical, how it is to be in medicine and how sometimes we do things that even are against our own health care, our own health. We're doing things because of what we were taught or that we were, trying to be resilient or just working through. So I'd like to hear your story from the beginning.
Well, I'll try to keep it brief. It is a long and winding road here, but you were absolutely right that I think the medical culture encourages us to overwork and to sacrifice ourselves, and that starts from a very earliest age. I mean, for me, it started from even from undergrad, certainly going through medical school and residency and fellowship. This idea that you are an agent of the work and that it is a good thing for you to sacrifice yourself. You come to work when you're sick, you come to work when you're tired, you don't take very much time off after you have a baby. You know, if you're bereaved or sad or anything else, too bad, still come to work because the patient comes first, right? So I integrated that into myself from a very earliest age. I have a story that I burned out 2 times in my life. But the truth is, I was probably pretty burned out the whole time in between there. First started in second year of medical school, and then, a much more severe episode once I was practicing as, what we call a tending physician, like when you're like the quote unquote real doctor.
Mhm.
Um, but really never thriving for any of like this 15-year period in between there. And for me now, kind of in retrospect, looking back at my story and my life, I integrated those behaviors of overwork, perfectionism, striving, all of that. Just ran and ran and ran and ran and ran until I hit a wall, backed off just enough to kind of catch my breath and then keep running again. Um, but the and so then that was through pediatrics residency, pediatric oncology fellowship, and then eventually I got into palliative care through there. The story of how I found my way into those things is some version of there was a hole and I filled it, right? I saw a need and I stepped into it, which is part of my personality. And I think something that I like about myself that I do that. The piece that I think was the part that I want to overcome and I want to help other people to overcome is the being consumed into the suffering of others or like taking on the problems of others. I was taking care of babies with cancer and felt that like if they were going through all of that, I didn't deserve to be happy either because this suffering existed in the world. And I kind of just like got sucked into it, which of course meant I didn't have any work-life balance, which of course meant I was constantly like consumed, always thinking about it, never turning that off, and that's just not a very great way to be. So through those experiences, through very dramatic crashes, if you will. One in which I actually got sent home from work. We had this sort of term of like being a disruptive physician, and I got told to go home for a period of 5 weeks and not come back to work. So that was devastating. But that was finally the sort of catalyst that got me to say, oh, okay, maybe all of the stuff that I've been taught is not the right way to go. Maybe gritting through, maybe overworking, maybe sacrificing myself is not really it. Maybe there's a way to be a full, whole human being and still be a good doctor. And let me see if I can find it. And that is the work that led to this book that I've just written and led to all of the way that I live now, where I mean, I feel like I've like gone through the looking glass into Wonderland because I'm like, oh my, everything I thought was true for like the first 25 years of my life, now I've turned on its head and kind of see the world differently. The piece that I'm not sure about is whether our healthcare system could survive if everyone made this transformation, because I do think that our system is kind of propped up by all of this self-sacrifice and overwork behavior. And I think that we need to be ready for some big changes if people really start setting their boundaries and taking care of themselves in the way that I advocate for. So that's my story in a nutshell. Details omitted to protect the innocent. But yeah.
Yeah, and it's interesting because so I'm an optometrist, I'm a behavioral optometrist, and I was having a discussion with another eye doctor who he has a company where he finds doctors for all the offices, and it started out in Florida, but now it's expanding across nationwide. And I said to him, you know, what is it that these young doctors want coming out of school? What is it is important to them? And the important thing wasn't money. The important thing was that they wanted to work in a place that had the highest quality equipment, like the cutting edge equipment, and they didn't want to work weekends. That's what they
Ah,
They weren't going for the high pay. They didn't want to, so in optometry, we have, like private practices, which are more medical, and then you have your retail, which is it's still medical, but if there's anything big happening, we don't have the equipment, we would send them to someone that's more medical.
right.
But the difference is private practices are usually open Monday through Thursday, or maybe Monday through Friday, but retail is open 7 days a week sometimes. And so these new young people coming out of school, they're like, nope, we're not doing that. So I think that they are kind of learning from us, or at least seeing that, seeing their parents or other people ahead of them. And the question is, hospital is 7 days a week,
Yep, the
24
hospital
hours a
is
day.
24/7. This is a problem that we have to solve. And I agree with you. I see this generationally. I think it's like cross-cultural across society, right? That in general, we are all changing our attitudes about overwork and like worth tied to productivity. Like these are just kind of general attitudes that I think are changing across sectors, not just in healthcare. And so that's coming in. But yes, and so then now we're really in this like discordant position of we have an essential service, like we have to provide it, like most of us believe that, right? We have to provide healthcare for people, and it is by its nature 24/7, or at least large parts of it are 24/7. And how do we do that and still ensure a good human life for the people who work in it? And I don't have all the answers. I think the first thing is saying that that's what we want to achieve. I would say that if we looked around, I mean, I am trained in systems analysis and change management. And so Edward Deming is like really, we go by Edward Deming. And one of his lines is every system is perfectly designed to get the results that it gets, right? So if you don't like the results, you got to change the system. And if you were to look at our healthcare system right now, if you just like aliens came from the moon or wherever they come from, aliens don't live on the moon. Please don't hear that fact. Aliens came from wherever aliens come from and just looked at our healthcare system and we asked them, what do you think this system is designed to do? I think that a logical conclusion would be to burn out the people who are working in it because it almost doesn't seem like it's a system created to make health for the people who receive the care. It seems like it's a system made to destroy the people who are providing the care. And so I think that we really, I mean, that's sort of our first like advocacy wake up call is like, let's just realize that this system is having an outcome that's not good. And then when we start looking at the health outcomes, the data's not great there either, right? Like we're kind of not winning on any front. So we really do need to change the system. And I think everybody agrees with that. So that's kind of like my first thing, like, hey, everybody, let's agree that we need to change this and we want to find a system that achieves everything. There's another sort of theme within the quality improvement sphere that we talk about. Well, first was a triple aim, now it's a was a quadruple aim, and now it's a quintuple aim. But basically, the idea that we don't have to have this or that. We want to have multiple things all at once. We can have high quality care at a good cost that is equitable and allows for good clinician well-being. And that the belief, right? We have to have the belief that we can have all of those things possible at the same time. If we hold a belief that it's this or that, we can either take care of patients or have a good life ourselves, then we're going to be stuck. And that's where a lot of people are when I start working with them. They just say, I feel guilty because if I do stuff with my family, I'm sacrificing patients. Or if I do things with patients, I'm sacrificing my family. And it's this belief that you can't have both at the same time. And I challenge that because I don't believe that. I think that we can have integration and we can have a way that we have it all. It just has to look different. And one of the biggest things we have to give away is this hero, martyr, savior type of mentality. You can't be the savior and be a human being. Like those two things actually can't coexist.
I totally agree. So let's go back to the beginning. When you were growing up, did you say, "Oh, when I grow up, I'm going to be a doctor"? I mean, how did you decide to become a doctor and not only a doctor, but a pediatrician, but not only a pediatrician, but an oncology pediatrician, which is a takes a very special person because you're seeing really sad cases all day long. So how did you even get to that point where you chose that?
Thank you for asking that question. It does track back to the very earliest age. I mean, I cannot remember a time where I wanted to be anything other than a physician. My mom is a nurse and my dad is a pharmacist, so I have been around medical life all of the time. They actually discouraged me from going into medicine because they knew that it was a very hard lifestyle. And I do think they had some interactions with doctors who were not particularly nice people. So that if you think back the old school kind of boy, if we think we overwork now, they really overworked in the 70s.
Mhm.
um that really discouraged my family, actually discouraged me from going into medicine, but I was not to be deterred. I was full speed ahead, did all the things, checked all the boxes during undergrad. What do you have to do as a pre-med? What's the best way to get into med school? Got into med school in my first try, which was fabulous, in my home state school, which is coveted because the tuition is less. So I went to LSU School of Medicine in New Orleans, which was a great training place because at that time we had Charity Hospital of New Orleans, which was a free care hospital, huge place for all of the people of New Orleans who did not have health insurance to come, which meant as a student, you got amazing exposure to all kinds of things. And I absolutely loved being a student there and having that experience. I'm glad that things are improving and that actually patients have more options for healthcare, but I do have to recognize that as a student, having that type of environment was incredibly unique, and allowed me to have a very um, rich education. And then I always love kids. I absolutely love children, as I think all pediatricians do. I prefer children to adults. I love talking to adults too. I just love people. I love hearing people's stories, but I absolutely love being around kids. I love playing. We cannot take anything too seriously. And I think that that's what allows me to do the really hard things, is because I keep that playfulness and that childlike aspect of it, whether I'm working with a child or an adult, that this can't be, I can't just sit around and cry about how sad it is that children get cancer. Like that doesn't allow me to do my job. I have to stay in the reality of, yes, it's sad, and I'm going to be with you in your feelings and support you in your feelings, but I also need to use my science and need to use my brain and need to be able to separate enough so that I can do a good job. And that I think that playfulness helps a lot. And so I love doing hard things with children because they remind us to keep playfulness all, no matter how hard things are. And kids really do go through these experiences with amazing resiliency, that like they just get up and play, even if they feel terrible. They'll vomit and then they'll get up and play, or they'll, have had a huge surgery the day before and then they get up and want to play. So that's been a joy to do that. I love pediatricians. I love being around people who love children. We're a joyful bunch. So all of those things, again, the science of blood diseases, the science of cancer was really fascinating to me, but also this opportunity to develop relationships over time with people. Often we take care of our patients over many years while they're in treatment. And then if the cancers come back, or even just following up from side effects, we stay with them pretty much their whole lives. So I did really like that continuity as well. And then I have come to realize, and I've come to be able to put a name to this, I like to do hard things. Making hard decisions, making high stakes decisions, being with people who are going through hard things, and being able to show up is something that I value. And it does feel like is my dharma. And so sometimes my answer to is like, why do you do the job you do, is because I can. And like, I can do it and other people can't. So I guess that means it's mine. And that there definitely is some of that just intuitive kind of aspect to it. And now I primarily work with people who are dying. I do hospice almost exclusively. Not all for children, thankfully. That is a very rare occurrence for children to need hospice care. But again, it's the same thing. Like when they do, I'm here. And I actually work really hard to create systems so that when that's needed, we can do it really seamlessly and really well. And that by embedding myself as a pediatrician inside of this machine of hospice, that actually creates a system where that very unique, very niche care for hospice care for a child can be delivered when it's needed. I went off topic. I don't even know what you started that question with,
I
but
asked you why
I
how you
obviously
got
love
into
what
doing
I
what
do.
you did. Well, how did you, you went from children to hospice, which is not always older people, but a lot of times it's older people.
It
So
is.
how did you go from one end to the other?
Well, it's a great question. I think that it's one of the biggest surprises of my career trajectory. I made the decision to make this leap when I was working at the Children's Hospital, practicing oncology and palliative care exclusively for children. It was very intense. I was at one of the, tertiary care centers, very high tech. People come from all over the world to get things there. Often so many machines that I've never even heard of before. And so that I feel like it was like a tour of duty. Like I was like, oh, I've worked here for 8 years. I don't think a person is made to work here for their entire career. Like this is just too intense. I'm ready to do something else. I'd always loved being in the community. Being in the hospital, downtown hospital was really never my happy place. I wanted to be out. I wanted to be seeing people in their own homes, or at least in a community care center. And so this agency gave me a lot of the yeses, right? It sort of checked a lot of the boxes for, this is how I want to be working with people. This is what I want to do. This is how I want to be spending my time. I want to be out in the world, not stuck in the hospital walls all the time. And it was right, it was after the pandemic. We were kind of emerging. I was trying to figure out, do I really want to stay here? Do I not? What's the next phase? I think a lot of people were doing that at that time as we were sort of coming out of the acute stress of the lockdowns and of the peaks and all of that. And this opportunity came available, but the downside was that it was not a purely pediatric opportunity. Now, the folks that hired me said, you're trained for this because as a hospice and palliative medicine doctor, we take a board exam in that, and that is not age specific. So the way you get trained, whether you did an internal medicine residency or a surgery residency or an emergency medicine residency, the hospice training is the same for everybody. So that was kind of what gave me the opportunity. This wouldn't be the case for any specialty where you could just jump from one age group to the other. Sometimes the training pathways are very specific, but this one happened to be one where you could jump. So then it was just me. I was the only one who had to decide, do I think I can jump? And I actually thought about it and got some pretty good counseling that it's not that different. In fact, the way that we're trained as pediatricians gives me even more because we're trained in family systems. Like we always thinking about family systems. So going into hospice where family systems are really important, you already know how to do it. A lot of our patients have advanced dementia. And so clinically, they're kind of like a small child, right, in terms of their mental functioning and all of that. So I've found that working with older adults with dementia is not all that dissimilar to working with young children with developing brains. And then the niche that I was able to fill is the young adult population, because while you said it's mostly older people, but unfortunately, we do have those 30s, 40s, 50-year-olds that get cancer or some other terminal condition, and that those patients do have a harder time fitting into the traditional hospice model. And because I had the experience with the really young people, I could fill that gap pretty well. So that was fun. And then I was assigned, it just so happened that I was able to pick up a team like in downtown Boston, which is the population that I love working with, and kind of some of our more lower socioeconomic neighborhoods. And that was really exciting to me. So I thought it was going to be a really big jump. I thought it was going to be this huge change. Like, oh my goodness, I'm going to be seeing patients in nursing homes all the time. And what it ended up being was patients who were slightly older than the ones that I thought I was trained to do. And everything else was like exactly the way that I wanted it. And I just love everything about it. Somewhere in there, I thought about quitting medicine altogether. So at some point, this was kind of like, well, even if you hate it, at least it's a paycheck for a little while. And I've ended up really loving it. And so I think that's been a huge surprise for me. And something I definitely encourage people now when I either am formally coaching people or just talking to people on Facebook, or like when you run into people, like don't discount totally changing specialties. Like it could work out. Like not, I think in medicine, this is another one of kind of like these themes of medicine that like the specialty you pick or the clinic that you join right out of like as your first job, you're like locked in. And I don't know, I guess that's great for the employers that we all think that, but I don't know why everybody thinks that, because it's absolutely not true. You can change jobs, you can change a whole career, and everybody not in medicine knows that, right? You work with people in all different kinds of industries. People change jobs all the time.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, and different ways of doing things. Like, when you were talking about the hospice, you were making like house calls, right? So it
Mm-hmm.
reminds me of the old-timey doctors that did house calls. It was almost like a different job.
Yes.
Going to
No,
one
it just,
place with the same staff, with the same everything, you're going into different people's homes and you're getting to know the families. You're not just seeing the patients, but you're seeing the families and you're seeing how they live and how they communicate with each other. I think it'd be very interesting.
it's amazing. Now, and I recognize that it's not for everybody. I love going into people's homes, and I was intimidated about it when I first started. Like walking up to somebody's house, you don't even know if you're at the right address. You don't know what's going on in there, and you're just knocking on the door. And then they've got a doctor walking into their house. I think that there's it's a very different power differential than when people are coming into your office and you know where all your stuff is and you've got your white coat on and you're that says Dr. Jones on the door. I think that obviously, given the fact that I need to get people talking and disclosing very personal, very sensitive things about their end of life choices and what they're worried about and what their symptoms of very personal intimate parts of their body are. Flipping the power dynamic is important, right? Like I actually need to make them feel like they're the expert and I'm the learner because that's true. They are the expert on what's going on. I'm just there with some medical facts
Mhm.
and a prescription pad. We don't actually write prescriptions anymore. Everything's electronic, but you know what I mean. But I love that. And I recognize that not everybody would, and that not everybody, would say, oh my gosh, I love home care. And thank goodness I get to do this. And kind of to the point, I think we were talking right before we came on, just about the shifts too. Like some people, I think that many people would say, I don't want to work nights or I don't want to work weekends, but that I do work with people who prefer it because when you have children, you may actually want to work on the weekends so that you can be there during the school pick up and drop off.
Mhm.
And then when your spouse is home on the weekends, you can work, right? That could be a preference for people. Same with nights. There's typically a differential where you get paid more if you work at night, or maybe you work fewer shifts if you work at night. So I do think that just like I love home care and there's other people who love the hospital, I think that looking for the ways that people might preference and trying to make systems that allow for that is part of how I think we can make this system work. I mean, I think we have to listen to people though.
Mhm.
Not just say, oh, you're gonna like working nights because we made this incentive. I mean, you have to say, what would incentivize you to work at night, right? Tell me. And I have the absolute joy of working for a wonderful organization with wonderful leadership that does that all the time. And tells us how do we make this work for y'all? How do we make this work for the doctors, for the nurses, for the social workers that actually work and take care of our patients? Our patients are important, but they really do say, you are the agents of the care. And so we have to take care of you first. And that is what I wish every healthcare organization did. And that is obviously the premise of why I want to recover people and recharge people, is that I think that how we save the system and how we give good care is by making good people. Burned out, messed up, brain fried people don't take good care of other people. We got to recover the people in the system.
Exactly. And if you are burned out doing something, there are so many choices now. I mean, I know there's jobs where the doctor or the nurse just sits in front of a computer at their house and they go over the records and make sure everything's right or go over people's medication plans or whatever. They do that. Or there's so many things. As an optometrist, I've worked, in office and I still do, but I've also worked virtually where I'm sitting in my kitchen and they have everything automated and the patient's there and I see all the video, I see everything, and I'm checking their eyes from my kitchen table. I mean,
Wow.
there is so many ways to use your skills. So, if people are feeling burned out, maybe it's because they're tired of doing what they're doing and they could switch. Maybe it's who they're working for. I've had positions where it's like, even though I love what I'm doing, the staff or the um company that's running it, I don't like how they're doing their business.
Yes.
Well, that puts stress. When you don't like the way things are being run, that puts stress on you. So if people just realize that they do have choices. So if that company you're working for is making you feel stressed, go find another company that does things the way you do like them. So, or they're in alignment with your beliefs, because there's also you know, how you practice. Some people want to practice one way, some people want to practice another way. So I think
Yes.
having choices is so important in looking at that whole, theory of how to make yourself feel happy and not burned out, because we feel excited and energized when we're doing things we love to do.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with all of that. And I think that one of the things that I wish for everyone that I work with and that works in healthcare is just to realize how many choices there are. There's no perfect jobs, right? I mean, I think that some degree of perspective is important too. Um, but that what I did was sort of to assign, the two or three most important kind of pillars. What are the most important elements, and then what can I sacrifice or compromise on, right? Negotiate for. Um, and then I think that, particularly you mentioned, that bad work environment or toxic work environment is something that I see people just tolerating way more than I think they should. People just say, well, I like the stated mission of this organization. Say you work for a major health, like I used to work for the Dana-Farber Cancer Center. People might say, well, I really like the mission of this organization to help advance cancer cures. And so I feel aligned with that. But that really doesn't matter if like the department that you work in is not good and your actual job is not good, right? We kind of have to look locally as well as the global mission, and realize that you have some choices. Maybe you need to move to a different department within the same organization if you feel that strongly about it, or recognize that, like you said, there are lots of ways to do good work, and working at the premier cancer center isn't the only way to align with a mission of curing cancer, right? Like there's so many other ways if that was, for example, your kind of primary driver of what you thought was important to you. And that I think that that's really something that I see as a deficiency in a lot of people that are around me. They get locked in on one specific way, right? Like this is my vision and this is the only way that it can be. And I think that that causes a lot of suffering unnecessarily.
Exactly. So when you're working with people, when you're coaching them, when you're helping them find this ideal, wonderful life within their profession, how do you do it? How do you advise them?
Well, we work a lot with personal mission. I think that that's one tool that I introduce, which is not common or like normalized for physicians to kind of have a mission statement for yourself. And that's actually something that we do a lot, working on that. Um, we talk about boundary setting a lot, and particularly boundary between yourself and your patients, and how to navigate that and how important that is. And that's something that many people have a lot of misunderstanding about. And so we often have to spend a lot of time unpacking what it means to have a boundary and understanding why boundaries are important, and looking at some test cases within their own career of where boundaries have not been held. And I share experiences from my own life to help people feel more comfortable, right? You see, I have had these messy boundaries and look at the trouble it got me in. So you don't have to be so ashamed to admit that you have boundary problems too. And then we put them in place, right? And we sort of support. We do some role playing, kind of walking it out. Like, okay, what are you afraid of if you put this boundary in place, and how might that look, or what do we think's gonna happen? And then I think that the more people that the group support is also an important piece. So the more people that we have kind of converting to this way of thinking and celebrating each other for resting, and celebrating each other for taking a sick day when they need a sick day, and celebrating each other for changing from the quote unquote like traditional academic blueprint into more of their own blueprint. Um, the easier it gets, right? Because then you can see people doing it. So um, that, I wouldn't say, I think it's kind of individualized, because it does, different people are starting from different points. It's hard to say that there's one prescription for every healthcare worker who is experiencing burnout, but developing self-compassion, awareness, mindfulness, watching your thoughts, understanding what's going on, some basic psychoeducation, and then really learning how to boundary are the main things that I see most healthcare workers need in order to get out the other side. And then the job crafting and the actual career stuff is like the easy stuff. Once we get the house built, we get the foundation built, then we're hanging the drapes, and that's kind of the easy part.
Beautiful. Well, if people wanted to connect with you, at this point, say, your website and where to find your book and
Yeah, definitely. My website is emmajonesmd.com, so that's pretty easy. The book page is there as well on the same website, so just look for the Phoenix Blueprint tab and you can find everything about the book. We are having a weekly web series that, depending on when this airs, may still be going on, but that's free to participate, and we talk about a lot of concepts out of the book. And I would be happy to connect on any of those places. You can also find me on socials, Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn.
all right. Well, thank you. So I have a personal question for you. What gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
My, I'll have two that are connected. I will, well, three. Okay, like health, my relationships, and my kids, which I guess is a relationship. But I think that I am really fulfilled by the fact that I find joy in taking good care of my body and eating well and exercising, and that has not always been the case. And so it's really sort of delightful that I feel that way. And of course, I actually feel good in my body. So that brings me a lot of happiness. I have wonderful relationships, both with my husband as well as with lots of other people around me, and pay good attention to maintain and cultivate ongoing relationships throughout my life because I now realize how important that is. And then my children are my joy because I have two girls who are 16 and 20 and are becoming quite independent thinkers and their own little people. And it's just a delight to interact with them and see the people that they're becoming, and recognizing that I had some part of that, but that also the world is doing what the world is doing, and they're pretty smart cookies and figuring it out on their own. And they still like to talk to me, and we still have fun together.
Yes, that's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today and sharing all your knowledge and experiences.
It was such a fun conversation. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, so I have one last question before we finish. What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
My best advice for living an incredible, amazing life is to remember that it ends. Um, we call it in my program embracing impermanence. As a hospice doctor, you are going to die. And I think that that just keeps us grounded and appreciative of everything. Every day, we're thankful for the good things that happened. We just remembering, right? Like sort of the fleeting nature of this, to me, drives happiness. And I think there's a lot of research that supports that as well. I have observed it in my own life with my patients, and I think there's also good science. So remember that life ends and enjoy it while you got it.
I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again soon.
Okay, thanks. Bye bye.